Carlos lives on a beautiful island off the coast of British Columbia. The island is called Galiano, after a Spanish explorer who discovered it many years ago. Last year, Adam and his family drove from Galiano Island to Central America. The vehicle they used was a 25-year-old motorhome, which they nicknamed Linz. The first place they visited was Guatemala, where Adam and his brothers became friends with a boy named Julio. Julio lives with his parents and brothers and sisters in a small village called Tulate. The purpose of their trip was to learn about families in Central America and to better understand the ties which connect us to our southern neighbors.
It was a really hot February day when we arrived in Tulate. My brother Tyson and I met a kid named Julio. After we played with him for a while, we decided we wanted to stay to find out what his life was really like. He had 11 brothers and sisters. His house was so different compared to our house in Canada. There were no walls on part of the house, and they kind of lived outside. Getting water for drinking and cleaning was a lot of work. You had to pull a bucket up from a deep well. Julio's mom washed the laundry by hand. At home, my mom uses a washing machine. Julio's village has no electricity, so a lot of the household jobs were done by hand. I wonder what it would be like if I lived without electricity. I guess there would be no TV or Nintendo. Julio's mom washed all the dishes outside. The ducks were happy about that because they could eat the food scraps. Inside the house there were 2 rooms, one for the kids and one for Julio's parents. They had tons of family pictures hanging up on the wall. Almost no one in Tulate had a car, but these traveling salesmen made it easy for Mom to do her shopping. A sort of walking store would come by almost every day. These people sold a lot of different things. One man sold dishes and pots and buckets. Another man sold blankets and towels and colorful materials. The people living there hardly bought anything in stores. The loads they carried were huge.
Trajo 2, pero como vino una mi cuñada de Oriente me las quitó, no porque tenía.
I think Julio's mom's favorite traveling salesman was the vegetable lady. She didn't buy much from her, but they sure talked and laughed for a long time. Julio's neighbor called over the fence that she would like to buy some carrots and onions. When she left, she put her huge load on her head and walked away. I couldn't believe she didn't even hold on to the basket with her hands. Usually after lunch, Julio's mom and dad would relax in the hammocks because it was so hot. One day, Julio caught an iguana. His dad cleaned it and put it on an open fire. We had it for lunch. It tastes kind of like chicken. Every morning, Julio's dad watered the small family garden. They mostly grew herbs for his mom's cooking. I liked the tamales she made. Julio's younger sisters always played in the hammocks. Every family in Tulate had at least one. Pedro, Julio's dad, sometimes worked on a big farm, spraying poisonous pesticides on different crops. He told us he got paid $2 a day for this whole job. Julio's family owned a small farm by the ocean not too far from their house. There were coconut trees and some pretty noisy turkeys. The animal trough needed filling with water, so Tyson helped with that job.
Bueno, lo que va, quédese aquí, quédese. Voy a dejar la pila ya que está la cubeta.
The main crop grown was corn, which the family harvested and stored for their own use. In Tulate, there were a lot of pigs that walked around the streets looking for garbage. They kind of acted like the local garbage crew for the village. One morning, Julio's dad butchered one of the pigs. He sold lots of the meat to his neighbors. Julio's mom kept some for the family. His older sister hung up the intestines in a tree to dry. They were used to make sausages later. On Saturday morning, an ice truck dropped off a huge block of ice. After packing it in sawdust, Julio and his dad loaded it on their horse, along with 4 dozen Pepsi. I thought this was going to be a party, but this turned out to be another job. Pedro got paid $2 to deliver this heavy load once a week. They returned the empties, which made me wonder why we don't use more reusable bottles in Canada. Everyone used wood to cook with, so the villagers used up a lot of trees every day. We are pretty lucky in Canada because we don't have to cut down trees to cook our food with. Men and women carried heavy loads. Tyson and I let Julio and his friends play with our skateboards. They liked them so much that they argued over them every day. We loved going for boat rides. There were so many things happening around these saltwater estuaries close to Julio's house. Local kids use these dudesh dugout canoes to go fishing in. One day, we went way up the estuary. I thought there might be crocodiles, but there wasn't.
Any crocodiles in here, Dad?
Fishing was the most important activity in Tulate. It was how most of the families made a living. The men went way out into the ocean to fish. They were always fixing their nets when they got back. A man from Guatemala City bought all the red snapper that was caught. The people who live in Tulate don't get a chance to buy the expensive fish. They are sent to Miami, Florida in a truck and then a cargo jet. The ocean helped out Tulate in lots of other ways too. A gasoline pump moved tons of salt water up to some big shallow ponds. There were about 8 people working there. After the sun evaporated all the water, the salt that was left looked and tasted just like the stuff on my kitchen table. They bagged the salt so that they could sell it in the grocery stores. The lady sealed the bag closed by using a candle to melt it with. I was surprised to see their toilet. There was nothing to sit on, so I just squatted down on the ground. Every morning after Mom made a fire, she put the kettle on for coffee. Julio's little sister got to drink it. Julio cooked himself an egg when he got home from school one day. I guess he was a pretty good cook for his age. One of the jobs Julio did was to take the corn to the mill to get it ground up. This corn flour was really important to Gloria, Julio's older sister. She made empanadas and tortillas out of it. Tortillas and fish soup was one of my favorites. The family ate their big meal at lunchtime. Gloria used a hand press to flatten the dough. After putting a little filling inside them, she would deep fry them over a hot fire. She made so many of these things that we got real curious. When they were cooked, Julio and Gloria went off and sold them around Tulate. This was an important source of money for the family. Gloria carried a table to Julio's school. At break time, she had to walk really fast because everyone wanted them. There wasn't a gym there, so all the sports happened outside. The boys were on little duty that day. After break, I went into Julio's school to check out his class. The room was pretty crowded, and there wasn't any electricity. That school couldn't have been very rich. Tyson and I were pretty excited in the class because we had a meal to give to the school. My class on Galiano Island had made a beautiful picture for this school. I think they liked the present. They gave us their pictures to bring back to my class in Canada. I learned a lot on my visit to Tulate. One thing I learned is that the kids in Tulate don't have nearly as much as we do. My idea is that everyone in the world, including kids, put all their money in a pile, and then we split it up fairly.
Hi, George. Hi, dude.
cambiar tu ser. La prueba yo te doy. Él me ha cambiado a mí. ¿No ves que soy feliz? Sirviéndole al Señor. Nueva criatura soy. El poder de Dios puede cambiar tu ser. La prueba yo te doy.
Adam Harris lives on a beautiful island off the coast of British Columbia. The island is called Galiano after a Spanish explorer who discovered it many years ago. Last year, Adam and his family drove from Galiano Island in an old motorhome called Lynn's to Nicaragua, a country in Central America. One of the places they stayed was Ometepe Island, where Adam became friends with a boy named Cesar Augusto. The purpose of their trip was to learn about families in Central America and to better understand the ties which connect us to our southern neighbors.
I spotted the volcano on Ometepe Island while we were driving along the Pan American Highway. This was going to be a special adventure for us. Galiano Island, my home in Canada, is twinned with Ometepe Island. I thought Nicaragua was a long way away, but I found out that it is shorter to drive to Nicaragua than to drive across Canada. The ferry was very different from the ferry I take to my island home. It was a lot smaller and made out of wood. Someone told us that Lake Nicaragua was the only lake in the world that had sharks. I was really hoping to see one, but I never did. Lots of passengers sat on the roof. They would never let us do that in Canada. The boat was so low in the water and the waves were so big that the ferry ride was really fun. There weren't any taxis or buses to take, so we walked into the town. Later on, we learned that a horse-drawn cart was the local taxi service. In the town of Muragapa, we met a really friendly kid named Augusto Cesar, and his mom's name was Lucrecia. They took us to their home. Cesar was lucky because their house was really close to the lake. There were always lots of people visiting at Cesar's house. Cesar had 8 brothers and sisters. His oldest brother, Marvin, had to milk the family cow. They never went shopping because they grew most of their food at home. I was glad to see they left some of the milk for the baby cow. Cesar's niece was only 3 years old, but she even helped water the garden. We gave the family some carrot and onion seeds from Canada, which they planted right away. They were real professional at growing vegetables. Cesar's mom covered the newly sown seeds with old palm leaves. This helped to prevent the hot sun from evaporating the water.
Look at this kid. Watch this kid.
The kids in the family all helped pound the rice they grew on their farm.
Come on, Tyson, give it up. Come on.
Tyson could barely do the job. It was so hard. The pounding broke the skin off the rice, which was then tossed into the air so the wind could blow all the skin away.
This is rice with the skin not taken off, and this is rice with the skin taken off.
Caesar had to help chop the firewood. This was a real important job because his family did all of their cooking on an open fire inside the house. We had rice and fresh fish for lunch with Caesar's family. It was delicious. Marvin caught the fish in the lake. We were glad that the lake wasn't polluted. The family spent a lot of time in their kitchen, like we do at home in Canada. They didn't have any electrical appliances, but the hand mill they used was quite strong. Caesar's mom made tortillas and other food from the milled flour. The floor was made out of dirt, but Mom kept it quite clean. Caesar's sister was able to wash the laundry at home because their family had running water. They were lucky. The plantain skins, which tasted like banana mixed with potatoes, were fed to Noan, their calf. We got a chance to ride Noan. That was so much fun. Noan's older brothers did a lot of the work for the family. Caesar's dad tied a yoke onto them so that they could work together. They helped pull a plow at Caesar's farm during the farming season. Caesar's brother was good at steering them. They can do the work of expensive tractors, and they don't need gasoline to keep them running. They helped bring water to homes that didn't have running water. But I think this water may have been polluted by the dirty cattle standing in the lake. The washing stands looked like lemonade stands. The clothes got dry pretty fast when they were laid out on the beach. You had to really be careful because the sun was so strong. The family's dugout canoe had a license plate patch on the side, but it was still a really strong boat. I think the kids are better at fishing on Ometepe Island than on my island. Caesar's sister had to help move some cows down to the dock. The cows had to line up just like ordinary passengers. But they wouldn't walk onto the boat like ordinary passengers. They needed lots of encouragement. It was exciting to watch all this. We learned that these animals were going to the capital city, Managua, to be sold for export. Nicaragua sells most of their beef to Canada. The people had to sit on the roof of the ferry because the cows were in the passenger area. To unload the huge bull, the crew held out a red cloth in front of him. The bull got so mad that he charged right into the water. I think the crew of that boat really liked their jobs. Have you had a Nicaraguan hamburger lately? On Ometepe, the people were always making things they needed. To build their homes, they used bricks made from mud. After the sun dried them, they baked them in a special brick oven. A lot of people in the neighborhood liked making their own music.
El poder de Dios puede cambiar tu ser. La prueba yo te doy. Él me ha cambiado a mí. No ves que soy feliz, sirviéndole al Señor. Nueva criatura soy, nueva criatura soy.
There were lots of small shops in Moegalpa. They sold vegetables and fruit at some of the shops, but my favorite one was the treat store. There were jars and jars full of candy. They made some of the candy on the island. It was confusing using Nicaraguan money. Every day the prices were changing. In only 1 week, everything for sale in the stores had gone up a lot in price. Caesar's mum even kept the road in front of her house clean. The garbage was picked up twice a week. They reused the garbage bags. I looked in the garbage wagon and was surprised to see no plastic, no tin cans, and no glass. We can learn a lot about helping our environment from the families on Ometepe. These people are professional recyclers and they don't even know it. Caesar's dad made a lot of things for the family. The axe handle he made from a big branch will work perfectly. Caesar tried to teach me one of his favorite games, but it looked easier to do than it was. There were fruit trees in his backyard. All the neighborhood kids liked to climb them. The little red fruits called hucote were my favorite. Caesar showed us how to eat sugar cane. I wish we could grow sugar cane in Canada. There was a big Catholic church in the town center. The priest, Padre Smith, was from Newfoundland. Caesar didn't like his mom combing his hair before he went to school. I guess kids have the same ideas everywhere. We wanted to see if his school was like ours, so we went there with him one day. There was only one school in Moegalpa, so all the students must share it by going to school at different times. Caesar went from 7:30 in the morning until 12:30. The high school students could only go on Saturdays. Caesar's town really needs another school. I worked hard at learning Spanish. My favorite saying was no entiende, which means I don't understand. Tyson and Caesar's grade 1 math books had a lot of similarities, but Caesar's class only had one math book to share. I don't think the school had enough money to buy more. Tyson and I had bought a surprise for the school from Galliano Island. Tyson's class had made a mural for our sister island before we left Canada. I think they were really interested and happy that we gave them a mural. They had a big surprise for us too. They gave us a mural to take back to our school in Canada. The only trouble about traveling is that you meet a lot of kids, and then when you go, you miss them. I like to live on Ometepe Island, and I'm going to go back there someday for sure.
Kids of Galliano, receive our greetings. Receive our greetings from the children of Central Education of Moyogalpa, from all the children at the schools in Moyogalpa is the name of the town where they live. Fernando Bermudez Lopez, that's the name of their school. Moyogalpa, their town, Isla de Ometepe.
Puede cambiar tu ser, la prueba yo te doy. Él me ha cambiado a mí. Ves que soy feliz, sirviéndole al Señor, nueva criatura soy, nueva soy.
In the winter of 1989, the Harris family left their home on Galliano Island, British Columbia, for a trip to Central America. Their vehicle was a 25-year-old motorhome. Their final destination, Costa Rica, with stops in Guatemala and Nicaragua. The purpose of their trip was to learn about families in Central America and to better understand the ties which bind Canadians to their southern neighbors. This is the story of how the trip began and of some of the adventures along the way.
The whole idea of the trip, of the kids and the motorhome and the adventure, it started with an interest in Nicaragua, actually. A friend of mine was going to Nicaragua, and I really didn't even know where Nicaragua was, but it was interesting, and there was war, and there was a revolution, and I thought, boy, this would be a fascinating project to go and look into. And my friend also mentioned that he wanted to twin our islands, the Gulf Islands, with islands in Nicaragua. So we headed down, 1987, went down for a couple of months, kind of researching Nicaragua and what was going on and what we could film, and what the concept actually was, Nicaragua, you still live, or you still love, and just got a real sense of spirit of the country. And it was incredible after 10 years of being, or 8 years of being at war, that they were still such an incredibly strong group of people. And within a short amount of time, I started to realize that there was no real desperation here. There was love and laughter, and people were just having a great time. All the neighbors were coming by to visit. I was there on the weekend. There was 4 young children, and every morning they actually would disappear about 6 o'clock with their mom, and they'd go down and buy a box of tomatoes at the market, and the children would go around the neighborhood distributing and selling tomatoes, like a newspaper route or a milk run or something. And so I got the idea that this is what I really want to film, is the family, the children in particular, as I have 3 young sons myself. to go back with my family.
In a motorhome, a 20-year-old motorhome it posed quite a challenge to me, and it really touched that sense of adventure that had been sort of locked up through my years at university. And we had sort of decided that a motorhome would be the most comfortable way to travel through Central America. Driving was the best way that was going to give us the most maneuverability, the greatest freedom, and a motorhome was almost essential in terms of traveling with 3 young children.
Simon is the youngest, he's 3. Tyson is 6, and Adam is 8. Adam's in grade 3, and Tyson's in grade 1. And we got a lot of support from the school, from their teachers. You know, we went to see the teachers and explained that we were going to take them to school for 4 months, and you know, could they supply us with schoolwork so that the children don't get behind? And we discussed whether we should use correspondence, but the school decided that no, we could take the work with us. And
we had the maps. We felt confidently armed with the road maps. They were quite up to date, we were assured. And we felt we would rely best on word of mouth.
We opened up the map, discovered that the closest U.S. Customs border crossing was in Bellingham. Is that right? Or Blaine?
Blaine.
We went across the border
at midnight.
At midnight. The motorhome broke down right at the border, right there.
3 hours.
3 hours. We were asking the Canadian
Simon
Customs.
was screaming.
We were asking the Canadian
Customs
Customs if we could borrow a flashlight because the batteries in our flashlights were dead. It was a tough start. We had broken.
We broke down rain,
actually.
It was freezing.
We'd already broken down twice that night. We left on our tour at 7 o'clock at night, and we broke down at 7:30 on Granville Street in the pouring rain. And the next morning, the horn started going, so that every time we turned the corner or did anything, the horn would. And this motorhome
has 3 very
three
large
big
horns.
and Lynn's, and so it was. Adam insisted, and so did Tyson, that we stop and do something about the horns.
They were mortified, completely embarrassed in the rush hour traffic in downtown Seattle in the morning, and there's this crusty old motorhome beeping and blaring at every 2-second intervals, and we couldn't do a thing to stop it. That was day 1. So by hook or by crook, we did it. We found ourselves driving through
Mazatlan.
Yeah, through Mazatlan, down through some incredibly beautiful mountainous country in Mexico.
We had to get to Guatemala by February the 10th because the visas they issue in Canada, you must use them within 30 days. So we had that deadline. We had to be there by the 10th. We arrived on the 9th and, spent maybe 3 hours at the border. We were wondering what it was going to be like. It was really, we had no idea. Nobody had been there. We hadn't spoken to people. We hadn't met anyone that was going to Guatemala. Or, this whole idea of we'd be networking with people just didn't come through. It was like we were out there on our own.
The night before, our first night in Guatemala, we stopped for a cold pop at sort of a roadside restaurant and ended up connecting with this wonderful woman, and subsequently stayed overnight in the motorhome in front of the restaurant and introduced her to the children. He had made us a list of names, and at that time gave us the name of a town called Tulate on the Pacific coast of Guatemala, which was about a couple hours from the border of Mexico. And she said it's there's a lovely beach there and so on and so forth. A rural farming community. This may be, is that how it went? Yeah, this may be what you're looking for. Go and check it out. And so we have the name, and then we sort of connected on the map. We had sat down with her in a map, and off we went. And we came there at around dinner time. So I started making a dinner of macaroni and cheese, and we were playing with this idea. Who should we be contacting? Some sort of city or village officials, or appear at the school, or what? When I think it was Tyson that came running in, just at really that second when we were sort of couched in all this indecision, and he said, Dad, Lorraine, we found the perfect kid. We found the perfect kid to film. His name's Julio, and we're outside playing soccer with him, and isn't this great? And he's a really nice guy, and can we film his family? And so we're introduced to Julio, and that's how we met the first family. We were brought over to his house a couple of days later. By this time we had also made contact with another man in the village who spoke some English, and so he was able to help explain to the family what our project was and what we would like to do.
We couldn't speak to him, but that never seemed to create any real problems, this fact that we couldn't talk to him and he couldn't talk to us. We always knew what was going on, and we went over to see his family, and his mother was all curious, and we were told his father was in Guatemala looking for work because the planting season was over, and he was a farmer, a peasant farmer. And so he was in looking for work, and his mother was busy around the house, and his older sisters, and it was this perfect kind of house with animals everywhere and kids and laughter and real busy. So we got out our little 12-volt color television that we had bought on the trip and started to show them the films that we had taken during the day, and they just loved it. Oh, and within minutes there was 300 people watching this 10-inch color television. I mean, and that was really repeated throughout the whole trip.
Julio's family sort of was representative of the structure of a lot of Guatemalan families, peasant families. He has 10 brothers and sisters, most of which have gone off to Guatemala City to find work. Julio would every morning go and with a tub of tamales and sell the tamales to the different fishermen or different small restaurants or families that were sort of regular buyers before he went to school. And the two younger sisters, I mean, they sometimes would accompany Julio to sell, and even at that young age, they were expected to do as much housework as they could in helping out around the house. And again, that's quite typical of what we saw in the other families throughout Central America. And
we arrived
quickly.
We arrived in Nicaragua. Met some old friends, that were Mosquito Indians, and told them what we were doing, and they immediately had this wonderful idea of, well, there's a Mosquito Indian refugee village up in the mountains, and no one's been up there, and
we had been talking about the need for more awareness and sort of international coverage, and about the Mosquito Indian refugee situation or problem, and we thought, well, this can relate. Let's look at the different family units that we want to film, and indeed we sort of came up with a list, and a refugee family setting is one which we felt also represented the state of children and families in Central America too. So with the help of George's contacts in Nicaragua, we arranged for an interpreter, who was also a good friend of George's, to accompany us to the Mosquito Indian refugee village. That is what it was. It was a group of, how many families?
It was 325 people.
325 people who had been removed from the northeast coast of Nicaragua when the war was particularly heavy into a more central area of Nicaragua, and basically had been forgotten for 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, they were living in a camp. I mean, they were getting by, but there was a real feeling for us that we almost missed them, and I think most people miss the refugees. I mean, the refugees they don't have a big political voice. They don't have. Once in a while, they get some.
It's a very real situation for the children and again the families, and that's why it was particularly drawing for us.
Yeah.
It really caught our attention. I know it did for me, and so we drove up there and spent a few days filming and living within the camp and filming one particular family.
The spokesman of the village, one of the leaders, who was also the school teacher, had a family, and he spoke Spanish, which a lot of the Mosquito Indians didn't speak. So he seemed to be, a good person to film, and his family, and so we met his daughter, Naomi, who's 10 years old.
10 or 11 years old.
And she's got an older sister and a younger. I guess there's 3 of them that are living now. There had been 3 other children, and they were all killed in a helicopter crash while the Mosquito Indians were being evacuated from the river. So this family, you know, half the family had been killed in a helicopter crash. I mean, things were as tough as anything that I'd ever seen. And
I think for me particularly was Naomi's mother. Just she had been broken. I mean, it was quite, I mean, still very, very painful. You know, they lost their land, they lost their home, and they, you know, were struggling on a very on the edge day-to-day existence. And she lost her children. You know, three children, you know, buried up in the cemetery.
It was such a, you know, a real feeling of dignity and
warmth. Oh, there was.
And,
yeah, don't get me wrong, but I just...
You know, it's so easy. I mean, this is one of the things that we're trying to focus on in these videos is, you know, this is, you know, there are some really harsh situations out there, and you know, reasons for people to be very angry, but you know, that's not the sense that we found.
No,
you know.
They weren't angry. That's, I mean, I should probably go on. I mean, you know, for me, I mean, she was carrying this hardship, but again, you know, there was still that spirit, you know, that and that hope. The name of the village where this family lived in Spanish is called Esperanza, which in English means hope.
Oh boy. What next is Ometepe, which is our sister island to the Gulf Islands, and you know, I'd been there before, so it was a sense of going back, and I really wanted Lorene to see our sister island, the kids to see it, so we were really excited about going to Ometepe and Lake Nicaragua, and the only freshwater sharks in the world are living there, and the island has 2 volcanoes. It's quite spectacular.
Well, I was really looking forward to a break from the motorhome. I mean, this was, okay, heaven. Okay, you know, we all got the kids' little pack set up, and, you know, we got, you know, our books and the school, you know, the school supplies and our little bits of gear that we needed, and off we went down to the fair. You know, it's like, I was really looking forward to that time. You know, I could spend at a guest house, you know, we didn't have to cook, and it was, you know, for me a real treat. So, you know, I was looking forward to it with even sort of more enthusiasm than perhaps usual. And we met that night, I believe, it was just that first night, with the Catholic priest, Father John Smith, also known as Bud. And being a Catholic, it took me a while to get used to calling a Catholic priest Bud, but that's what he prefers to be named as. And he's been living in the community on Ometepe Island. We were living in a town called Moyagelpa. He had been there for...
What, a year and a half?
2 years. And so we connected up quite quickly with him, and told him what kind of family we would like to film. We thought in the barrios, in the smaller outskirt neighborhoods of the town. And he brought us down actually that evening and introduced us to a family. Mm-hmm.
So we went down and we met Cesar Augusto, and we could see this was just great. And the boys immediately got along with him. Of course, they seemed to get along with most of the children down there. And they got along very well. And you know, we started to find out about the family and how it all worked and the dynamics. He was the youngest of 8.
Of 8 children.
And, you know, the reality was that school was something different. School wasn't really seen as a method to get ahead as we see it. You know, remember we were talking about that, particularly with Padre Juan.
Yeah, that's what
you know,
Father John was saying was one of the more striking differences within that community in their attitude towards school. Cesar Augusto was enrolled in school and went to school. We accompanied him to school actually on a couple of occasions. But as far as his parents were concerned, particularly from his father, his point of view, you know, for his son to receive an education wasn't as important as teaching him so the responsibilities of being able to take care of himself. For instance, you know, the farming, and perhaps maybe taking over the land one day.
They had been peasant farm workers up until 1979, and there was the revolution in Nicaragua, and there was quite a bit of land reform, and they had received 10 acres. They were a very proud family. I mean, they had their cow in the backyard that they milked every day, and they made their cheeses and their yogurt, or something like yogurt. They had their horses and they had their oxen, and they had it together. You had that sense that these people are not about to run out of food.
No sign of desperation.
Yeah. The second day or third day, they started to suggest this banquet. You know, it was going to be a banquet that they were going to put on to show their friendship and everything. So, you know, we said, you know, that's not necessary, but they were very much into having the banquet. So we came over at lunch one day and they put the tablecloths out and they prepared the food, and
there was a big table for the adults and then a smaller table for the children, just like, you know, we would do in Canada, and it was placed outside.
One of the sons had been out all night fishing and had caught, you know, a lot of little fish, so we all got our fish, and what do we have, rice?
A little fish in a bowl with some soup and rice and beans and fried banana. And
it was great. It was a wonderful banquet.
It may have been that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, what a real show, too, of friendship and generosity. I mean, these people really didn't have so much, but they really wanted to do this for us.
We really were looking forward to a break. So we had a deadline to get down to Costa Rica, to get to San Jose, and visit with my parents, who were going to be staying at a hotel for a week. So that was neat to be headed for that, and we knew we'd have a break because Grandma and Grandpa would be there to help with the children and give us a little time off.
And we also were aware of sort of the striking differences between Costa Rica and the rest of the countries in Central America that we had visited so far, meaning that there's a large based middle class population, and it's much wealthier than any of the other countries in terms of their own economy. And I mean, so there were sort of two reasons, you know, that we were excited about Costa Rica. One, it was the personal break that we knew we would be looking forward to, and two, you know, a chance to be filming a family. And in this instance, we were looking for a family that would represent that middle class base to use as a bit of a contrast in which Costa Rica as a whole, as a country, represents within Central America. And so there we are sitting in our motorhome, sort of again wondering where we were going to find such a family. When a fellow came up to us, and he was an American fellow, and he saw our motorhome and the Canadian flag, and you know, howdy there, how you doing? You know, I'm so-and-so from the United States, and he was on a teacher exchange program and student exchange as well, which there's quite a few programs of that nature between the United States and Costa Rica. He said, oh, well, if you come down to the pool, you know, in 2 hours, I'll introduce you to this woman who in turn will have contacts for you. And this is how we eventually got set up with the family in Costa Rica.
It was a real shock. I mean, that's the biggest contrast I've ever seen in my life, was between this family with the cars and the color televisions and the VCRs, and really reminded us a lot of our own environment. I mean,
well, just how we even met them. We basically went through an interview and we passed, though.
The parents really didn't have a choice, because the kids, meanwhile, had snuck into the back playroom with their children, and there was no way that their children were going to miss this opportunity, you know. And their children were at a bilingual school learning English, so they were able to talk English to Adam and Tyson and Simon, and so there was a suspicion, but on the other side, a real excitement that they were going to be able to really get to know some North Americans. The very best part of our trip to Central America was the sense that I received from the people of strength and dignity. I mean, I came away with a lot more hope and a lot more understanding and a realization that they don't need all that we have. You know, that, as a matter of fact, I hope they don't get all what we have here. You know, they seem to be in tune and at peace with the world and its resources far better than we are. You know, they know how to get by with very little and yet enjoy their families and their friends a great deal.
There didn't seem to be too many, you know, gross misconceptions that we had to correct or anything like that. I mean, they were very curious about, you know, where we lived and where we came from, and, you know, why we were down there. You know, well, why are you down here? I mean, you know, you live in this, you know, country, you know, that we've heard is, you know, so fabulous, Canada. You know, they know of its, you know, geographically about, you know, the mountains and the beauty, and it's in the north, and, you know, that we're wealthy, you know, that it's a wealthy country with, you know, with the kids and their motorhome. I mean, I was astounded at the rate in which we were welcomed. You know, there was just this immediate warmth, you know, and it was very real. It was there, so accepting, and, you know, with the connection that I had with the women, both, you know, verbal and nonverbal, because I couldn't really communicate myself very well in Spanish, but just that bond, that feeling that I had with each woman of the family that we lived with was quite, enlightening. I hope with these videos that we can help, you know, touch, you know, the heart of the Canadian children, you know, towards a greater understanding of their southern neighbors. You know, this is the children of Central America, and, you know, for the children and adults alike to help dispel that pervading myth that sort of runs throughout when we perceive the third world as some sort of desperate black and white, you know, entity with all this suffering and endless poverty. You know, what we saw was on the contrary. There's so much spirit and life and love, and, you know, the kids are kids, you know, and the parents, they want the same thing for their kids that the parents here want. You know, we're not strangers, we're neighbors in a very global sense, and I think for me that became much more stronger throughout, you know, the trip, was these striking, you know, were the similarities.
I'm hoping that these tapes, the videos of families down there will get kids up here thinking about families elsewhere, and you know, if it does that, then we've done it all.
I got lots of them. Look at my cat. Total.
Where? Show me.
Yes, you got a big one.
Ouch!
That's a big one.
Ouch!
Go look at them. I can't carry you. The crabs might bite me.
I picked up a honeybee today.
Can I see it?
The crabs are gonna bite me.
You want to see it or do you want to feel it?
They're gonna bite me right now.
I want to see it.
I'm gonna go
I
get those
want
crabs.
to feel it.
There's one with just
Hi,
one
crab.
arm.
I know
Oh, don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. He's my friend. Crabs are my friend.
Oh, holy jeez. That's the giant one. Look at that one.
Oh, that is a big one.